Dear students, welcome to Lalsa's classes. In this particular video, we are going to understand a beautiful poem by S.T.COLERIDGE. The title of the poem is KUBLA Khan. The poem is prescribed for the syllabus of graduation as well as post-graduation in many of the universities in India. Now, talking about the poem, it is a celebrated visionary poem by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, which explores the creative imagination by contrasting two worlds: an exotic idea of paradise initiated by the historic figure of KUBLA Khan and a more personal poetic ideal sparked by the muse. Different though these two worlds are, they become interlinked through the pleasure dome, the caves and warning voices. It seems there is a thin line between pleasures gained in paradise and the price to be paid for such creative energy. Now, talking about the main theme of the poem, we can say that it is imaginative potential realizing the strength of dreams through poetic ambition. Secondly, nature contrasted with the creative impulse. And last but not the least, reconciliation of the opposites within the human psyche, for example, striving for pleasure or reaching ideals. Now, talking about the rhyming scheme of the poem, what strikes the reader as a poem progresses is the unorthodox rhyme scheme, which starts off in a tight fashion but gradually loosens and weakens, only punctuated here and there with binding couplets and one tercet within the formal syntax. Therefore, we can say that the rhyme scheme of KUBLA Khan is unusual in the fact that there is no regular and consistent pattern of rhyme. Now, talking about the structure and meter of the poem, the meter varies too. From tetrameter, that is 4 beats per line, to pentameter, that is 5 beats per line, with the odd trimeter, that is 3 beats, and hexameter, 6 beats. Feminine endings are frequent, where the extra beat falls away at the end of a line. This inconsistent rhyme and meter, together with the complex narrative, has led to the deeper study of the poem's structure. Some find 7 distinct sections within, based on the subject matter. Others focus on the definite contrast between the first section, that is to say lines 1 to 36, and the second section, that is to say lines 37 to 54. Now, talking about the background of the composition of this poem, there are several different forms of this poem. Coleridge's handwritten version in the British Library, that goes to 1797 to 1804, has 2 sections of stanzas written before the eventual publication in 1816. So there is a big gap between the original writing and the publication we see here. He was known to read it out to his friends from time to time. There is much uncertainty over why Coleridge wanted to wait, so long before publishing this unusual poem. Many ask this question: did he think it unworthy of publication? Perhaps he only committed after none other than a thespian like Byron suggested he do so, having read and admired it. The poem was composed while Coleridge was resting in a farmhouse after a long walk near Linton in Somerset, England, in late summer 1797. Although some put the date at roughly a year later, he had stopped to alleviate discomfort and put the poem together in a sort of reverie brought on by 2 grains of opium taken to check a dysentery. Now talking about further, we find that this reverie or dream state produced a long verse of 200 to 300 lines, but Coleridge could not recall the whole thing. He could recall only 54 lines of it, having been interrupted by a man from Porlock, a nearby village. The visit has gone down in literary history. Anyone who interrupts the creative flow of a genius is said to be that person from Porlock. Coleridge published Kubla Khan along with Christabel and The Pains of Sleep in a small booklet form in 1816. Overall, it wasn't that well received, some critics thinking it incomplete, others saying it did not really mean anything. But today we find that it is much in demand, as it is prescribed by a number of universities even in graduation and post-graduation level. Now you see, if we talk about the tone of the poem, we find descriptive, magic and enigmatic. Coleridge was directly influenced by Samuel Purchas's book, His Pilgrimage, or Relations of the World and Religions, London 1613, it was published, when writing Kubla Khan. Now other influences include Milton's Paradise Lost, book 4. We have a great influence of this particular book on Coleridge's thought when he composed this poem, and the Bible's Old Testament as well. Various books mentioning the God-given land flowing with milk and honey. Coleridge wove all these elements into his poem, adding various exotic images and female characters, blending history and fiction, the impersonal and personal, past narrative, memory and would-be imaginary scenarios. The overall tone is dreamlike, fantastical, which reflects the poet's deep interest in dream worlds. Now talking about the paraphrase of the poem, line number 1 to 5, we see, in Xanadu did Kubla Khan a stately pleasure dome decree, where Alf, the sacred river, ran through caverns measureless to man, down to a sunless sea. Now the poet, if we see the paraphrase of these lines, it will go like this. The poet starts with the title of the poem, which he says is a vision in a dream, and it is just a fragment of that vision. The poet sees that Kubla Khan, the Chinese king, ordered the construction of a pleasure dome in Xanadu, a Chinese city. The sacred river Alf flowed through that city and ran in immeasurable caverns towards the sea, where it does open itself to the sun. The poet means that the river doesn't show up after it undergoes into the long caverns. They are immeasurable for man. The vision of the poet is this: exotic atmosphere, which was more exotic when the poem appeared. These verses contribute to the main idea of romanticism and the power of imagination. Now talking about the paraphrase of line number 6 to 11. Let's understand this. So, twice 5 miles of fertile ground with walls and towers were girdled round, and there were gardens bright with sinuous rills, where blossomed many an incense-bearing trees, and here were forests ancient as the hills, enfolding sunny spots of greenery. Now the paraphrase, the poet goes into the details of the grounds selected for the palace. He says that the ground was 5 square miles on all sides, with high towers and walls around it. The gardens of this palace were full of beautiful rivulets and incense-bearing trees. It was full of old forests and green spots. The palace was a paragon of beauty, bedecked with natural flora and fauna, as the poet sees in his vision. These verses further add to the exotic idea of the presentation through imagination. Now when we move further to line number 12 to 24, it reads like this. But oh, that deep romantic chasm with slanted down the green hill athwart a cedarn cover, a savage place, as holy as enchanted, as ever beneath a waning moon was haunted by woman wailing for her demon lover. And from this chasm, with ceaseless turmoil seething, as if this earth in fast thick pans were breathing, a mighty fountain momentarily was forced, amid a whose swift half intermitted burst, huge fragments vaulted like rebounding hail, or chaffy green beneath the thresher's frail, and mid these dancing rocks at once and over, it flung up momently the sacred river. Now the paraphrase goes like this. The poet explains in wonder when he sees the beauty of the landscape. He states the beautiful and deep space that goes down the green hill suddenly comes across the cedar cover. These cedar trees are very long. It seems a wild place with holiness and magic in it, as if some demon lover of a woman appeared under the disappearing moon. Such is the haunting scene where the poet looks at the chasm again and sees the fountains coming out of the earth, as if the earth is breathing and panting, or turmoil is seething beneath the surface of the earth. This mighty fountain bursts for a moment and makes huge vaults, with hails coming fast on the earth. It seems the grain is falling from the thresher. It seems that this fountain is throwing up the sacred river into the space in the middle of these dancing rocks. Now, these verses add to the main idea of the power of imagination, the exotic atmosphere, and enhancement of the romanticism. Moving further, to line number 25 to 34, the stanza reads like this. 5 miles meandering with a mazy motion, through the wood and dale the sacred river ran, then reached the caverns measureless to man, and sank in tumult to a lifeless ocean. And amid this tumult, Kubla heard from far ancestral voices prophesying war. The shadow of the dome of pleasure floated midway on the waves, where was heard the mingled measure from the fountain and the caves. Now, the paraphrase reads like this. The poet now turns his attention to the river. He states that the river meanders 5 miles. Most of its motion is mazy through woods and valleys until it reaches those caverns which are very long. These immeasurable caverns show the length of the river. Then, making noises, this river falls into the ocean, which is as peaceful as a lifeless place. Kubla Khan hears the voices of his ancestors amid this tumult. They prophesy a war as the shadow of the dome moves on the waves and mixes up with the noise of the mingling of the fountain and the caves. These verses are highly prophetic. They show the power of the imagination of the poet to look into the future. Now talking about line number 35 to 47. It is like this. It was a miracle of rare device, a sunny pleasure dome with caves of ice, a damsel with a dulcimer. In a vision once I saw, it was an Abyssinian maid, and on her dulcimer she played, singing of Mount Ebora. Could I revive within me her symphony and song? To such a deep delight it would win me, that with music loud and long I would build that dome in air, that sunny dome, those caves of ice. Now the paraphrase goes like this. The poet states that after looking at that palace and its dome in the vision, he observes that it is a miracle to build such a great dome with sunlight falling on it and ice on its caves. The poet sees a beautiful damsel who is playing Mount Ebora on her dulcimer. Now her features show that she is from Abyssinia. However, the poet feels at a loss about how to revive her song and her symphony. If he could be able to do it, he would be able to build that dome in the air with that the same music, the same sunlight falling, and the same caves of ice making appearances. The poet is fully intoxicated. Here we find a beautiful expression. The poet is fully intoxicated to show his imagination's power and enchantment with the exotic lands. Moving further to line number 48 to 54. These are the last lines in the poem prescribed. Now, and all who heard should see them there, and all should cry, beware, beware. His flashing eyes, his floating hair, weave a circle round him thrice, and close your eyes with holy dread, for he on honey dew hath fed and drunk the milk of paradise. Now the paraphrase. The poet states that all those who have heard about this stately dome that the poet has created with his imagination would cry out, saying that all should become alert. It is a warning to others about the king's wild eyes and crazy hair. They would say that it should be encircled thrice so that the people should see or refuse to look at him because he has eaten honey and drunk heavenly milk. In other words, the poet thinks that this vision would enchant the onlookers. Therefore, people should be advised beforehand about this powerful vision of the poet and its likely impacts. Now, talking about the literary devices used by Samuel Taylor Coleridge in this poem, we find simile. Simile is a figure of speech in which two things with different qualities are compared to present a vivid description of an object or a person or a concept, it may be. There is one simile used in the poem in line 21, such as use fragments vaulted like. So here we say like rebounding hail. The fragments have been compared to pieces of hailstorm to show their impacts. The next poetic device we find in the poem is personification. Now, personification is attribution of human qualities to an inanimate object or concept. Now, Coleridge has used personification in the first stanza where he states, as if this earth is fast, thick pant was breathing. As if this earth in fast, thick pant was breathing. A person breathes, so therefore comparing the earth to a breathing human being. He also has personified rocks in line number 23 as the dancing rocks. Now if you see dancing rocks, it can be presented as transferred epithet as well, because the word dancing here is working as an epithet. Therefore we can say it is transferred epithet as well. And it is necessary to understand here that all the transferred epithet are primarily personification. So even if you say personification, it doesn't make any difference. As far as the marks are concerned, dancing is a human characteristics, but the poet has attributed this quality to rocks. Now coming to the next poetic device, that is metaphor. There are two metaphors in the poem. The first is used in the 12th line where it is deep romantic chasm. Here the deep romantic chasm represents the creativity and deep imagination of the poet. The second is used in the last stanza, such as woman wailing for her demon lover. Now here wait metaphorically represents the desire for love. Yes. Synecdoche. Synecdoche, you see, is a literary device in which a part of something represents the whole, when small element represents the whole concept. So that goes for synecdoche, and Coleridge uses it beautifully here. In line number 19, such as a mighty fountain momentarily was forced, where the fountain has been used for the waterfall or the streamlet that is coming out of a gorge with force. Another poetic device we find here is assonance. Assonance is a repetition of the vowel sounds in the same line, such as the sounds of E in the deep delight, a stately pleasure dome decree, and sound A we find in through caverns measureless to a man. Measureless to man. So here we find second example where we have sound A prominently repeated in same line, so therefore it goes for assonance. Now there is another poetic device used by Coleridge, consonance. Consonance is the repetition of consonant sounds such as D sound in deep delight. It's not only E, but then it goes for consonance and assonance both in the same line. Another example, sound T in fast thick pants breathing. and sound F. Another example, from the fountain. So we find a number of examples, given by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, to present consonants here. Another poetic device, let us understand, he has used apostrophe. Now apostrophe is a device used to call somebody or something from afar. Here the poet has used an apostrophe to warn someone, beware, beware. Now, which means that he is calling someone, anonymous person, to be on alert. Another poetic device we see here is alliteration. Yes, in most of the poem, alliteration, simile and metaphors become so prominent. We find Samuel Taylor using this in the repetition of same consonant sound in the same lines, was such as the use of S sound, sympathy and song. The analysis shows that Coleridge's use of literary device has helped him present a complete and luxurious picture of the palace of KUBLA Khan and the beauty in that reign. So we find that the poet has used these devices very artfully, to make the prosody appear even more beautiful. Well, that's all in this video, students. I hope the paraphrase, the concepts, the background of the poem and the art and adulation must have been very clear to you. And needless to say, if you like the presentation, please do like and subscribe for it. Thank you. See you in the next video with some other literary item. Thank you. Bye-bye.